Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So, as I'm trying to bring the news to you and why it matters to you, the ATF is now looking at criminalizing private sales. According to the New York Times and verified by AmmoLand news sources, the new rule is expected to be unveiled at the end of the year. President Joe Biden plans to announce that he has directed the ATF to close what every town calls the private sales loophole, a digital loophole. The private sales loophole is when the individual sells a firearm for profit that does not possess a federal firearms license. So what they're trying to do is stop anyone who's willing to sell a piece of property that they own right now. And, well, duh. It's kind of happened in New Mexico already. We've already had this in play. What they're wanting to do is force private sales to go through a background check and to stop them from happening, period. Now, what has it done in New Mexico? Nothing. Crime is still at the highest point it's been in New Mexico. Especially in larger towns. This will have no effect on crime, period. But this is what the ATF and the Biden administration is trying to do. They've also, as I mentioned on last night's podcast, tried to introduce a 1,000% excise tax on any firearm that is sold. And what that means is that if you have a $500 firearm, they're wanting to make it $5,000 worth of taxes or sales, because they're trying to prohibit people from having these firearms, specifically any semi-automatic firearms. Now, why are they doing this? Duh. Again, the federal government kind of hates you. And you should already understand that. How do you fight it? Simply put, the best way to fight this is just don't accept it. Don't do it. If you trade between two people, if you know this person is not a prohibited person, then there is nothing you've done wrong as far as I'm concerned. But the letter of the law is now saying, especially in New Mexico, that you actually have to take them to a place to have a background check put on them. This isn't how the world is supposed to work. And the only way we get past this is what I've said time and time again, is just simply by ignoring the law. You know, the simple fact that the pistol brace rule is in effect, and there are so many of us that have pistol braces. Not myself, but a lot of us in the 2A community have simply said, we're not going to listen. Same thing needs to happen with this. You know, a 5,000% increase, that should set off bells and whistles on everybody and everywhere, because if you're a poor person, if you're not one of those privileged people that makes $50,000 or more, $50,000 a year or more, you're one of those people that falls in this category that they're trying to target. And I would tell you that it's an unpopular opinion right now that even felons who have proven that they have paid the price need to have their rights restored. And this happens in the 2A time and time again. We look at all the stuff that's happening in the world right now, and can you honestly say these people that have done nothing wrong and have paid the penalty and have went ahead and made amends for that penalty, deserve to not have their rights back? Okay? The same thing goes with everything else. So it should look by now and be very obvious that the Biden administration, the ATF, is coming after those that are just willing to live in the 2A. You know, the simple fact that you take a piece of property, and that's what it is, and you've transferred it to someone else, and that's not okay with the current administration. And now they're wanting to impose a 5,000% excise tax on anyone that is going to sell firearms. What does that do for the average person? That puts it squarely out of their reach into the rich man's realm. That's not how our founding fathers intended this to go. You know, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yet we're seeing the administration come after this time and time again. Why? It should be pretty damn obvious by now that the administration wants to keep you unarmed, uninformed, and the reason why is because you can oppose the opposition and the oppression they're willing to push down on you. What do? Again, simply put, you know, time and time again, we see these issues come up, and we wonder, well, I do, what we're going to do to get around them. And it boils down to something that ANCAPs and libertarians have said for a long time is, why are you complying? You know, I'm asking this of conservatives because time and time again we see conservatives line up with a certain group of people that are willing to allow this to keep happening to the populace. And that's not how it should be. The populace should be armed. The populace should be the ones that make the government afraid. And we're in that space right now where they don't want that to happen. So what are they going to push down on us that they don't want us to be able to stand up and say no? There aren't enough ATF agents, there aren't enough FBI agents to push this on the American people. And it's time that we all stand up and say no. So let's look at the other news that's going on. Let's look at the other news that's going on right now. So we have the Fentanyl Island, which is a homeless camp that has exploded in California, where fentanyl's running rampant. You see people like Riley Gaines coming out and saying, hey, no, let's save women's sports. What does this all boil down to? It's very simple. The federal government is engaged in a culture war that none of us care about, none of us want to be in. So why are we having to participate? Simply put, we don't. We only have to for them. We don't have to for us. You know, there's a lot of guys, a lot of women, a lot of people in the country that have just decided that we're done. I see that more and more now. You know, when you have this two-tier justice system that consistently pushes us away from where we should be, where the law is the law and it's blind and you actually have to obey that. You know, the blue guys need to actually step back and actually think really hard. And we have to look at our law enforcement, our local law enforcement, specifically our sheriffs, specifically our local law guys, our local chiefs, and actually ask, is this what you're wanting? Seriously. If this is the case, why do you want the American people to be unarmed? What are you going to try to push down on them that they can't stand up and say no? You know, that's a silent question, but it has to be asked time and time again. And, you know, it's very frustrating to cover the 2A and to cover news stories and to see this time and time again as a reoccurring theme. You know, there are lots of people in the culture war spaces that are waking up and realizing that compliance, saying you're sorry, is a bad plan. Neo came out, if you didn't hear about this, in the most recent culture war spaces and said, no, I don't agree with this. And he's right. Where do we stop? You know, where is that manly part of society, whether it's male or female? I mean, that manly part that says we have to preserve society. Where is it at? You know, I watch society as it decays, and I wonder to myself time and time again, where are those few individuals that'll stand up and say, no, enough's enough, we're done, we're not playing anymore? That's where we should be, because it makes the opposition have to counter that. When we actually don't comply, it makes them irrelevant, and that is the best thing that it could possibly happen. This is why I've been so anti the government, anti-public education, is because we've gotten to this point in society where we're not actually doing what we normally would do. And I say this as a man. You know, they're trying to demoralize masculinity and make it not a thing. And that's not how our society works. Masculinity is something that we have to celebrate in a weird way. The simple fact that society exists is because of both paradigms. But in addition to that, you have to look past what one side only focuses on. They only focus on the feminine side of this. But if it weren't for men putting their foot down and actually saying no, you know, we're supposed to defend, protect this because we see it as sacred. So as we watch the news devolve into the where it's at in today's society, what are we going to do? Well, I know what I'm going to do. You know, my dad said always, time and time again, that I have to be a sheepdog. What does that mean to be a sheepdog? It means that I protect those around me no matter what. And if they're going to start gunning after people that are just kind of prosecuting their life as they see fit, well, screw them. The best thing that Americans can do right now is simply make the government irrelevant. And you can't look at the news stories that keep coming up and realize that we have to be part of that. We don't. And a lot of people have checked out a long time ago because they're tired of the culture war bullshit. And they decided that they're done with that. Because the culture war really doesn't matter to normal people. But they're being, this, because of COVID, is being pushed into places. And I say this because COVID was that one place where they took away everything, all the sports, all the other stuff around our society, and started pushing us in this little place where we actually had to engage in politics. Politics should never have been a two-way issue. Your rights aren't up for debate. Yet, time and time again, we're having to stand up and say, hey, we have to be that guy that stands up. We have to say, no, enough's enough. Where's your line? You know, I've talked about that line in the sand before. My line happened a long time ago. You know, the simple fact that we're seeing time and time again that they're demonizing people in the 2A community because we simply exist. You know, I have never used a weapon in anger. There are millions of us that never have, and nor would we. It's always those unhinged people that spin off and do something stupid. And usually what happens is there's someone who's not spun off that actually stops them. whether it's law enforcement or it's actually some guy that just carried a gun, learned how to use it, and was responsible about doing it, they stood up and said no, and they ended the threat. We're there now. You know, it's sad that we're at this point in society where we look at things, or I look at things in society, look at the news, and I see these things consistently being the case. You know, why is that the case? You know, I ask myself that. I'm like, I look at this and I get disheartened in some cases because I know we're winning legally. We are, time and time again. You know, the pistol brace rule was basically decided, whether they want to admit it or not, it was decided in court that this is probably going to fail on the merit of what it is. Yet we still have an administration that's determined this is an issue, and they're going to push it. And this is a hot button issue that I can see people actually stop and say, no, we're done. Especially when we have surveys coming out where 60% of the population actually own firearms. They know that they didn't do anything wrong. They just have their rights. They just decided to exercise those rights. So why is it that we're at this point in society right now? You know what? As I said, this is kind of sad, but is it really? I mean, when you look at what's happened to society, where people are so brainwashed into thinking that Hollywood and that mass media aren't propaganda, but they are. We're being propagandized to right now as American citizens, and how we react and what we do matters. So what are you going to do? You know, from the conservative point, they're probably going to conform to the law. Should they? No. From the ANCAP point, or from the libertarian perspective, why would you conform to a law that doesn't matter to anyone else except for you? A criminal is not going to obey the law. You can look at California, you can look at New York, you can look at Chicago, and you can see the crime statistics where criminals don't care, and they never have. You know, a law is only good for people that are willing to follow it. And the only ones that are willing to follow it are people that are part of society. So those fringe pieces that aren't part of society, how do we deal with it? Be honest, I know one way, and that's to deal with them decisively. That if they're willing to perpetrate these crimes against you, you end them. Let's be a little silent there and think about that. We end the problem. When the government has become the enemy of the people, we're supposed to rise up and do something about it. And there's a silent majority that keeps seeing this time and time again that are going to rise up. What are you going to do? You know, I ask myself this time and time again. If that silent majority has finally had enough, and they finally look at the two-tier justice system, and they say, no, enough's enough. You know, there was a scandal that, well, not a scandal, it was a kind of a false flag type of thing that happened where they thought that a shooting happened in the Capitol. And you know what my first thought was? Is that someone finally had enough and went after those people, and they kind of deserve it. How many people think like I am right now? You know, that's what I think is brewing right now, is that we have a group of people right now that are so frustrated and so pissed off at what we're seeing that someone's going to do something stupid and cause the federal government, who has way more resources than they do and that we have, to overreact. And I can't fault either side right now, because I honestly feel just exactly like those people that want that pound of flesh. I want those people in Congress to understand what the hell's at stake right now, and they don't. Should I kill them? No. The best way forward is peaceful protest. But at the same time, where do we stop being peaceful? Where's that line again? You know, I keep looking at these news stories that keep coming out time and time again. Where is that line where people say enough's enough and they're done? How many times can you try to push down something, this woke ideology, on people that don't want nothing to do with that? You know, when I say this woke ideology, when they say that they're going after your kids and they mean it, what do you do to stop them? And is it wrong to actually stop them physically, like end them completely? These are hard questions, especially for me. Because as I've covered the 2A for a year or more doing this podcast, I look at this time and time again and wonder, where the hell have we went? You know, if you see these headlines like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they wouldn't be headlines. We'd be looking at these people and knowing they're nuts. That's not where we're at now. These people actually have power now. These people have some sort of sway. How do you break that? You know, this is a fair question. I'm asking this in the dark, trying to understand it myself, because we're at that point where people are done. You know, you come after our kids, you come after what is an inalienable right as a human being, as a natural American citizen right now. And now we're at that point where just existing and you don't agree, you're the enemy. It's telling to me that they're willing to put 1,000% excise tax on something that is a right. I mean, that takes a $500 firearm and puts it well into the $5,000 range. You're saying only the rich deserve this right to defend themselves. That's not how our country was designed to ever be. Yet we're here now. And this is being pushed by one side. And what's really sad is that there are people from the other side that will actually side with them, because this seems to be the hot button issue of the day for them. But is it really? Because I think that you trying to mess with our kids is a little more important than that. You know, sending money to a country that has nothing to do with us. Basically trying to start World War III. Why are we doing that? Why is our administration right now allowing that? You know, they don't seem interconnected, but they are. Because if they're wanting us to do that, but not look at what's happening here in the now. You know, we have cities right now where there are people that will walk into a store, take whatever the hell they want, and leave. And you're not supposed to do a damn thing about it, nor is the police. The police are supposed to protect us, protect the people. But they're allowing that to happen. If they can't protect us, now specifically, were they ever meant to protect us? You know, all those Back the Blue guys, think about that. If you're in one of those strong Democratic strongholds right now, and the police are just willing to let you be victimized, and you can't do anything about it, where do you go from there? And all of us in the rural parts of the country, we can't let that happen. It can't happen. You know, when Jason Aldean talked about try this in a small town, I really understand what he means now more than ever. To go do what they're doing in larger cities in a small town, we can't let that happen. Because if we let that happen, we've given up a piece of the American experience that we can't get back. How do we fix it? We simply put, we put our foot down. It's time, America. It's time for our country. It's time for people with real backbone to stand up and say, enough's enough. We're done. Fix your stuff in those weird states, those weird cities. Fix it. Because we're not going to let it happen here. Like, share, subscribe, be great.
In the top, I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would have thought that I ain't catching all slack and I have enemies on my ball sack? I'm thinking it's